Initially, apparently, they didn't use barges on the canal. They used lighters. It was small boats, basically. It was only about this 1840s, 50s, I think, they began using canal barges. And that's when you had people like Michael Kavanagh, James Kavanagh, got more employment by providing it was a horse to draw these barges from the Foyle upright to Strabane. So it's a fairly prosperous period probably for the lock keeper at that particular stage. Again, with the declining trade after 1850, it becomes less profitable, and at that stage also the canal begins to deteriorate. There's no real money spent on keeping it in shape. The different locks begin to leak water. The canal itself silts up in places, and so smaller and smaller loads can be taken, so that by 1900 that's some serious problems. It continues going at some reduced level until the 1930s, and at that stage it's really on its last legs. Now, some of the people here can remember the canal going and having barges there in the 1930s, 1940s, but it officially closes about 1950, and that's the finish of the canal. And it was families like the Devines have to move in a sense. Well, they had a farm here as well, so that kept them going for a period. The other family, the Cramseys, who had the locks at the Foyle, also didn't have a farm, so they had to exist by trade. There was a short-lived prosperity period for the lock keepers, maybe from 1920 to 1945 and 1950. They became smugglers. The time of the setting up of the border, they developed a fairly good smuggling trade across the River Foyle, and both Devines and Cramseys became major smugglers.
Allegedly, yeah.
Well, no, the Cramseys would be no doubt.
All falls into place.
The
Devines no doubt either.
Hey, the Devines no doubt either.
I'm a bureaucrat, I'm saying it legally.
Especially during World War II, when there was major money to be made from smuggling, with various shortages and so on, rationing. So there was a fair exchange of trade, and that probably kept the families going until the 1950s, and after that, a serious tail off. So that's a very brief potted history of the canal. I'll begin closing it in Strabane in the 1950s, and this stretch then comes in total disuse. And then it was 4 years ago they begin to have an attempt at a reconstruction, and they've done this bottom mile of the canal, so from here to the Foyle, from Devine's lock, as it was, to Cramsey's lock, and that was the. But now, the problem I suppose faced this canal, and why it was something up so much, was that it was tidal in part of it, and the debris was coming up from the river at times, and I suppose they were blocking it up and so on. So it was difficult keeping it going, and as a result, I suppose, with the development then of road transport in the 1920s, it finished it as an economic proposition. So the canal was a fairly short-lived element. Now the idea is to develop it as a tourist area, as a walkway, as a nature reserve,
recreational,
basically recreational, and I think that has a function there. Again, we think of the families that had to move away, but in recent years it would become a very lonely spot here, and we can imagine maybe the Devine family during the late 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. It was a fairly lonely spot down here on winter nights and so on. And so they had to depend on family and neighbours for the killing and so on that kept traditions alive. So that's how many of these families kept their family history alive, by groups meeting, talking about things. And this is why I think this Devine family was so fortunate as to have a family history, and the one that was recorded in the 1920s was by Thomas Devine, as a starting point, and then others apparently have, but I know nothing about the Devine family really, apart from what I've gathered in their work in the canal. So that's basically this particular part of it. Anything else we can talk about maybe now? This road's Greenlaw Road. Now, it's probably a strange name for an Irish roadway. It came from the first Scottish planter who came here about 1610, Sir George Hamilton, and it came from Greenlaw in Scotland. And so the name Greenlaw was the name that was given to the place where he settled. And at the top of the hill there was a shed built. That's supposed to be the site of the Greenlaw Castle, built between 1610 and 1613. It seemed to be a fairly short-lived thing, so I don't know. And then Sir George himself, he left his district, went to Tipperary in the 1630s, and his brothers took over actually. So it became part of the whole Hamilton connection, and the Hamilton family controlled all land from the Derry border right through to Newton Stewart from 1610 until it was 1903. And so anybody working, getting land, building houses, they were always at the mercy, I suppose, of the Hamiltons, who were not bad landlords, who were very good landlords actually. And for example, in the building of this canal, they made the money available for building it, an attempt to build up local prosperity. So you have these stories of the raging landlords who kept people poor. Strabane landlords were not, in the sense that they were fairly generous towards tenants. Now, there were many poor people certainly, but they weren't bad. Anyway, that's this. Martin is over here, leads you on a walk along the canal. I'll follow on behind you.
Yeah. The main thing is Fran actually had a photograph showing the Devine cottage. This is where the lockkeepers lived in. Then I suppose some of you have seen that photograph. It's maybe on the notice board out in the clothes. The cottage was actually just here. See where the sycamore tree is? Yeah, it's just really, that's where the cottage was. The remains of the buildings, just some sheds.
The main Devine houseway,
yeah, and there was just some sheds. So the farm was actually just here. There you are, there's a man know the whole place.
There was a small cottage up here, about 100 yards, wasn't there?
McCauley.
Well, there's Carlins about the 1860s now. They lived on it. And then there's a further one down here.
There's a man will know all the names and all the locations he's lived here. So maybe if we walk on up, we'll walk up round part of it anyway. I know you want to get back up.
He talks about up.
I go north all the time. I go north. So actually, where the canal connected, it would have connected Derry. It's the docks in Derry, and that's the economics. So connected it then to Strabane town centre, and that's the idea of the canal. And what we're actually standing on is the tow path. So this is where the horses would have dragged the barges up and down. And that road as well going down was part of the tow path as well. Will we down to run up?
Aye.
Yep.